I've lived a life that certainly hasn't followed any script. When I was a young lad, everything began as a tale of any typical kid growing up in America. But then, the plane took off. After 7 decades in India, I've been on a journey that I could have least expected. But I've followed some innate passion to protect reptiles and the humans they interact with. I wouldn't have changed a thing.
Well, I was raised in southern India, so it's perfectly natural for me, as far as I'm concerned, to settle here. And it has all the elements that I love. The warm weather, plenty of reptiles, good people, good hot food. In India, as many as 1 million people are bitten by snakes every year. These bites are accidents, and they can be avoided.
Knowing the habits of these snakes and taking steps to avoid accidental encounters with them can save many, many lives.
Snakes are very common simply because we provide everything their prey needs. And snakes, of course, follow their prey. And people interact with snakes on a daily basis here. It seems pretty obvious that walking around at night without a light is a pretty dangerous thing to do, because you could step on a snake that gets in the way. Sticking your hand into a pile of brush to grab some hay to feed your cow, or let's say a lady's cooking in the evening and she reaches for a stack of firewood. All these are possible places where you can get bitten by a snake. It's usually panic attack, and usually they do the wrong thing. There are very, very old, sort of tried and true methods of treating snake bite. Cut it, put a tourniquet on it, try to suck the venom out. None of this works. Guaranteed, none of it works. In fact, it's very dangerous. It's easy to avoid being bitten by a snake. And it's also easy to treat a snake bite, but people have to know how to do it, and do it right. Man, the adrenaline's pumping, man. Watch out, I can't control it. Oh, she's beautiful.
Oh, she's beautiful.
Absolutely. Don't worry, you won't be out for long.
Whoa! Whoa! Whoa!
There are very few reptiles who will do this. They say that reptiles get tired real easy. How about humans, man? Here he comes. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, this is a very sacred moment. Fantastic. Ah.
How do you like that, monkeys?
12 feet of venomous snake. You know, this is the super snake.
This is the story of one man's quest to save the king.
Making a dent in the long under-supported puzzle of people's lives being upended by a snakebite is not rocket science. There's tens of millions we still need to reach in rural India to get life-saving messages to sink in. We know what has to be done, and we're doing it. People are amazed I love snakes, the same creatures that unintentionally bring harm to vulnerable populations across the globe. I will never stop doing my part to help save both, and I have a renewed energy to accelerate solutions on the ground. I may have been at it for a while, but in a way, I feel I'm just getting started. There's no time to lose. We just need the world to wake up to this long-ignored crisis.
Please. All right. I'll step up first. Everyone, Ron Whitaker.
Thank you. A little over the top, huh?
Not at all. I loved it. That was fascinating. What a great look into your life. It seems like you've had a lot of fun in your life.
Always, and still.
So when was your birthday?
When
was your birthday?
It was May. I mean, he was lying. It wasn't recent.
But 80
but I did
years
turn
old.
80, and I sometimes don't believe it. I mean, I don't feel 80, but...
You've got great energy. All right, so let's start with the basics. You're 80 now, but you were born in the States.
I was born in New York City, in Queens, in New York City. But we very luckily moved to northern New York State, a little village called Hoosick on the Vermont border. And that was fabulous. That was the wilds.
So tell me about where you call home right now.
Right now, I live near Mysore, a city in southern India. I lived in Chennai for, well, most of my life, actually, outside of Chennai. And that's where well, we'll get to the rest of it later.
Okay, just a little sneak peek. And here in the United States, so you were born on the East Coast, raised there. What brought about the move to India?
Yeah, very interestingly, my mother divorced my father when I was a little fellow and met a wonderful man named Rama Chattopadhyaya. And he had this dream of setting up one of India's first motion picture laboratories in color. This is way back in the late 40s, early 50s. So we moved to India in 1951.
And what was that like? Culture shock for you?
I don't know. I only know about the word culture shock now. I didn't know about it then. But we moved to a place called Juhu Beach outside of Bombay. And can you imagine for a kid of 8 years old to move to a beach like that? And it was a big empty beach. If you go to Juhu now, you won't appreciate it. It's just jam full of people.
Yeah.
But then it was this vast, wonderful place to live. For a kid, it was fabulous.
What was your life like at that time?
Well, I didn't have to go to school for the first half year I was there, which was great. I think everyone will empathize with that. But yeah, it was just, everything was fascinating and new. Every day was something new.
Were you homesick?
I don't think I was homesick. I was homesick for some of my cousins, for example, whom I grew up with. But no, I don't think I was very homesick. I was fine there.
So one of the pictures I saw earlier, you seemed to be younger than 8, and you had a snake.
Yeah.
So did your fascination with snakes and reptiles begin in the United States, or once you moved to India?
It did. That northern New York State, my mother found out in that area there were no venomous snakes. So I came home with that milk snake, which is in the picture, and instead of like being the average mother, get it out of here, she said, wow, it's so beautiful. And I'm sure something clicked in my brain, and from then on, it was snakes.
So it's rebellion, is what you're saying.
Yes. Well, but can you imagine what she thought when she realized we're going to move to India, which was the land of cobras? Now, hey, that's a little bit different. Now, what's going to happen to this kid?
Yeah.
Well, I'm still here, aren't I? I mean,
Do you remember your first encounter with a snake in India?
I do, actually. On Juhu Beach, I saw a snake crawling behind the house, and I already had sort of gotten a little bit familiar with snakes because I met some snake charmers who were total liars. They gave you all sorts of wrong facts about snakes, but they did identify the snakes which were common there, and that was a rat snake. And I almost caught it, but I thought, but what if it's a cobra? Because it didn't spread a hood or anything, but it could have been a cobra, so I didn't catch it. But I remember it.
Your fellow students, your teachers, were they all about the snakes? Did they like them too?
You know, I was really lucky in going to a school in a place called Kodaikanal in the Palni Hills. And it was a wild place, a wonderfully wild place. And I found a green pit viper and got it back without getting nailed by it. And interestingly enough, the biology teacher said, well, we can keep it in the class aquarium. Now, which biology teacher anywhere in the world would say something like that? So it was a series of lucky events that, you know, made me continue my weird occupation.
You say a pit viper?
It was a pit viper.
Those are like popular sunglasses these days.
Oh, really? Okay.
Does anybody know that?
All right.
So you moved to India, you lived there most of your life, but it was 10 years before you returned to the United States, is that right?
Yeah, I finished high school and in 1960, and I spent 1 year sort of goofing off before I went to the States to ostensibly go to college. I say ostensibly because in fact I did go to college for a whole year. I'm not an academic, and a self-admitted dummy, because I just couldn't hack it. So
Where did you go to school?
University of Wyoming.
Okay.
And fishing and hunting.
Yeah.
That's all I did the whole time. So I flunked college. I started working as a traveling salesman, and then I was a merchant seaman. I was a dump truck driver up in the Black Hills of South Dakota. I did all sorts of jobs. But I ended up getting a job at a place called the Miami Serpentarian. And it was run by a guy named Bill Haast, William Haast. And he was my guru for sure. This guy, he'd been bitten many, many times by venomous snakes and survived. He injected venom into himself in gradually increasing doses to immunize himself. This guy, I mean, the scientists all called him Wild Bill.
He sounds like it.
Surely. Well, here he is. I mean, he would handle king cobras just casually, grab them by the neck, extract the venom. He was the main venom producer for the whole world, actually, at that time. So I learned a lot. And later on, it was very, very important for me to learn these things.
How long did you work with him?
I was there for 2 years. And in those 2 years, I learned basically what became my life after that.
Did you do the same sort of thing? Would you grab these cobras?
Well, not then. And yeah, I was a little more careful than he was. I hadn't injected myself with venom. Yeah. But I was catching rattlesnakes and other snakes out in the wilds. And I learned a lot, interestingly, from local snake hunters there in Florida, too. So it was just a whole learning experience the whole 2 years I was there.
And then what happened at the end of those 2 years?
Pardon?
At the end of those 2 years, what happened?
I got drafted into the U.S. Army. Yeah, that was during the time of the Vietnam conflict, and I was against organized religion and organized violence, but I couldn't say no, because when they drafted you into the Army, they say, okay, it's either 3 years in jail or 2 years in the Army. Which one would you choose? You know, so I had to choose. But they made me a medical lab technician, which was actually quite a lot of fun because I learned a lot about medicine. So it wasn't so bad.
And then at some point you returned to India. You didn't settle in the United States.
Yeah, well, the nice thing about the Army career also, they sent me to Japan for 6 months. And so, you know, I was back out of the United States and looking around the world. And when I finished the Army, I realized that I have to get back to my family. And my family was in India. And India is just such an exciting place. I can't tell you how exciting it is. So obviously that's the place I'm going to live.
And you went back, you went to Chennai, my birthplace as well, right? And you decided to open a snake park. Was that right away? You got there and you were like, bam, I'm going to be Wild Bill of Chennai.
Well, I'll tell you, having worked at the Miami Serpentarium and seeing all these hundreds, if not thousands of people coming in and getting very excited about snakes. Yes, people are scared of snakes, but you have to admit they're fascinated by snakes. And I said, okay, we are living in the land of snakes, India, and there's no snake park there. We've got to have a snake park. It's exactly how it all started. And it was very simple to start with. but yeah, the first year we started it, we had 1 million visitors.
Really?
Yeah, 1 million people came in, and the price was 4 annas a ticket. And those of you from India will understand what 4 annas was. It's less than a nickel. And so that was our ticket price. So we weren't getting rich.
How did you sort of scrape together the funds to put it together, and the people and the snakes?
Have you got a half an hour for another story?
I know.
Now, getting the funds for something like this wasn't easy, but I ended up selling everything I had. I had a stack of vinyl records, sold all those. I had a bunch of fishing equipment, sold all that. And once it started on a very small scale, it got some newspaper publicity. And then some local companies actually started chipping in money to keep things going. And amazingly, the state of Tamil Nadu Forest Department said, the chief conservator of forest came out there and said, this is a wonderful opportunity for people to learn about snakes. Would you like to set up your snake park in the city? I said, yeah, of course, but how do you set it up in the city? Well, we just happen to have a small deer park in the city, and we can give you half an acre of land. I mean, my eyes must have gotten big as saucers, and I said, of course, sounds like a wonderful idea. And we shifted and opened the Madras Snake Park.
And you had some important visitors.
A few years after we started, the then Prime Minister of India, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, came. And this is one Prime Minister, one head of state in the world who was totally convinced that conservation was a good thing to happen. And we're talking, early 70s, mid-70s. This is kind of early for conservation to become a popular thing. So it was brand new for most people. But we told her about all the problems, about Silent Valley in Kerala was going to be flooded by a dam project, and about all the problems that conservation was having. And she says, I'll take note of that. And sure enough, she did. She was just amazing, and we've made so many accomplishments thanks to her.
Mm-hmm. And then a few years after you opened the snake park, snakes weren't enough, you opened a crocodile bank.
Well, that was a little bit later, yeah. But what happened then, when I said conservation had just started, the World Wildlife Fund had just started in India. And they gave me a grant of a magnificent 3,000 rupees. I know it doesn't sound like much, it's like about $100. But the point was, in those days it was enough, along with a bit of hitchhiking, for me to travel to the rivers in North India to see what was happening with crocodiles. And what was happening was tragic. Crocodiles were going extinct, especially the gharial. And we had to do something about it. We had to start breeding them in captivity.
Why was that? What was the problem?
Well, rivers were getting dammed, the rivers were getting polluted. People were killing crocodiles for the skins at that time. People were collecting the eggs to eat. I mean, there was just so many pressures on crocodiles at that time. So I became, from a snake-obsessed boy to a croc-obsessed man. So, yeah.
And is that where it ended? Snakes and crocodiles?
Not really. Sea turtles, well, we started with just a dozen crocodiles.
Wow.
And not knowing that actually they're all rabbits in disguise, because you look at the breeding was just incredible. I mean, we ended up with 2,000 crocodiles. Does anybody want any? I mean, we're giving them away. Please, on your way out, just sign up. But no, there was a problem.
Yeah.
But it wasn't limited to crocodiles either, because...
Could you release them back into the wild?
We did. We supplied 1,500 crocodiles to various states in different parts of the country. And what was then a big conservation issue, as you can imagine, now became a big conflict issue. Because people had lived without crocodiles in their habitats for so long, for a whole generation. And now, thanks to Ron Whitaker and his team, they're popping them back into the habitat, and they're starting to attack people. So in fact, we're dealing with that today as I speak. My son is a curator at the Madras Crocodile Bank, and he's got to deal with this conflict situation all the time. So conservation is okay, but just control yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think I interrupted you. You were saying something about sea turtles.
Sea turtles were really hammered. And at that time. Oh, yeah, just quickly, we'll just talk about, the sea turtle slaughter in those days was just incredible. This was in West Bengal, and these are Ridley's sea turtles, and they were being killed by the thousands. And a young lady who was one of the first lady herpetologists in India, we sent her on a mission to take photographs of this slaughter. And they went again to Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and she passed the laws that stopped the slaughter of sea turtles. So, we were real activists, and it was really working. It really happened.
So of all of these, I think you have a special affinity for the king cobra, because that's even your Gmail account, right?
That is, kingcobra@gmail.com, in case anyone wants to. Yeah, okay, those of you who like snakes, and I'm sure there's some of you out there, anyone who likes snakes has got to like the king cobra because it is just such an impressive, magnificent beast. And interestingly enough, although it is scary to a lot of people, I mean, after all, it grows to 18 feet long. It's venomous, but it's a very intelligent snake, and it wants nothing to do with human beings, I can tell you that. When you walk in the rainforest, even to try to see a king cobra is very difficult because he always sees you first. And I know what's going on in his mind. Oh, God, there's another bloody human being. Get out of here. And he shoots off because we are the most dangerous animals on the planet. And he knows that, he or she. Yeah.
You have become so well known in the herpetology community that there are snakes being named after you. So there is now a Whitaker's boa, a Whitaker's cat snake, a Romulus crate, and even a Whitaker's termite hill gecko. You consider it an honor? I mean, it seems
that's
an honor.
the challenge that happens when you reach the age of 80. People start naming stuff after you. No, seriously, I wish they would name it after descriptive names. The snake has bands, so it's a, bandensis or something like that, But anyway, let them keep it up.
Do you have a favorite among them?
Yeah, the crate.
Yeah.
One of the most venomous snakes in India is called Romulus. Oh.
You also, along with your wife, created several films. You were a film producer, and you and Janaki created films for National Geographic and for BBC Natural World, many films that focused on wildlife conservation.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that work and how you got into that.
Well, it was very exciting that our snake park and our crocodile bank had millions of visitors coming and learning about reptiles. But I realized that every time you have a TV broadcast of one of those movies, millions more people are seeing it just in that one broadcast. And it's not just in India, it's all over the world. So that was a very exciting thing. And to be very honest with you, I'm a bit like James. I was totally obsessed with being a filmmaker. I just wanted to make movies. And I got into that phase for several years, quite a few years. And yeah, we did make some pretty successful. I even got an Emmy Award.
Hey.
And I didn't know what an Emmy Award was, to be honest with you. I thought, okay, some award. And they sent me this long telegram. National Geographic says that you have to come to New York City, you have to bring a tuxedo, and tuxedo, New York. I mean, forget it. And my mother was so angry at me. She said, "You didn't go to New York to get your Emmy." No, they sent it to me by post.
You still have it?
Yeah, I still got it.
And those films really sort of helped make the Madras Crocodile Bank a household name in India.
It was certainly part of it that, yeah, it's nothing like TV to get some popularity. People coming up to you in the airport saying, "Can I do a selfie?" and stuff like that. Yeah, so I felt a little bit proud of myself for a while there.
When did that end? When did you stop making films?
I think the last film we made was 2011 or 2012. It was we made a film called A Million Snake Bites. So that's when the snake bite stuff really started happening.
You must have realized before then, having been in India for all of those years, having worked with snakes, that snake bites occurred, that it was a problem.
Yeah. Certainly, I did a lot of study in old literature about snakes, and I found stuff like this. I mean, rather amazing stuff. Okay, back in the days before antivenom, the British Empire, which included India, decided, well, what to do about snakes? Well, just kill them all. Which is, of course, impossible. You can't kill them all, although they did kill quite a few. How about 117,000 in 1878, 127,000 in 1877? And they're killing thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of snakes, but it wasn't really affecting the, reducing snake bite problem at all. Luckily, antivenom was made shortly there, 30 or so years after that, and India had some of the first antivenom in the world. But the problem still existed, and it hasn't changed that much. That is the tragedy.
Was there a time that you realized snakebite is really a problem here in India?
It was something which happened to us every day, because I was the local sampwala or pambukaran, depending on which language you want to put it in. And people would come to me saying, oh, I'm bitten by a snake, or my uncle or my brother's bitten by a snake, please help me, cure me. And of course, I'm not a doctor, so I had to take them to the hospital. So I became an ambulance driver rather than anything else. But again, we were the educationists too, in telling people about how to avoid getting bitten by snakes. So that was our main job. But it was something which was happening, on a daily basis, and we knew about it.
And in the late 60s, you met a tribal group. Tell us about that work that you did with them and sort of that life-changing impact.
This was a very important part of my life. We, at that time, in the late 60s and early 70s, there were as many as 10 million snake skins being exported from India every year to companies leather companies in England and in France and in Germany and Italy and Japan and the United States. And most of these snakes were being caught by a tribe called the Irlas. The Irla tribe is a tribe of Aboriginal people in Tamil Nadu, my state, my home state, so to speak, or our home state. And these people are the best snake hunters in the world. They are incredible. But at that time, they stopped the snake skin industry they had an act called the Wildlife Protection Act, the government of India. And by doing this, they basically stopped the livelihood of the Irlas. And my friends, my peer group, people I had worked with already for several years when I was setting up the snake park, were starving. I mean, they had no other job. They were working as ditch diggers or farm laborers, and it was really tough for them. So we hatched this idea that they could get permits to continue catching snakes, not killing them, but extracting the venom, supplying the venom for the production of antivenom, and then releasing the snakes back to the wild. Now, would this work? It took us years, and the elderly gentleman, is a birdman by the name of Salim Ali, and he was very, very well known, and he, amongst other people, we called our patrons, and we went to the government and said, we need permission for the Irlas to catch snakes to extract venom. And it worked. It took us 4 years to get these permits, endless cups of tea at government offices. I mean, just convincing them. So we set up the Irla Cooperative, and they started extracting venom the same way that we were extracting venom at the Miami Serpentarium. So I knew the techniques. I knew how to extract the venom. I knew how to process it by using a vacuum desiccator and later on a freeze dryer. And this is what it looks like today. Now you see those mud pots there. Those we call low-cost housing.
Affordable housing.
Yes, no, exactly. Mud pots are perfect because they stay cool and the right humidity, and you just cover them with a piece of cloth with a rubber band over the top. And it's not a stack of cages or anything fancy. It's very simple, and if it gets dirty, well, you just chuck it away and put another pot there. They're very cheap. So this is the Irla Cooperative as it is today. This was started in 1978, and now it is the primary producer of venom for the production of millions of vials of antivenom every year in India. Millions of vials. And I tell the Irlas, man, you guys are saving tens of thousands of lives. And they sort of shrug and say, yeah, okay. I don't think they really appreciate how much they should be appreciated.
But they've been appreciated by others. They've received a prestigious award.
No, that's very true.
Yeah.
And in fact, the university, they got the chance to meet, well, okay, shall we start at one? This picture is pretty dramatic.
Oh my gosh. What are we, I didn't realize there's a snake over my shoulder. What is happening here?
Okay, the University of Florida recognized the fact that they had some snake hunters in India, like the Irlas, who could help them solve the python problem. Almost all of you, I'm sure, have been aware that it's an incredible invasion of pythons in Florida. The mammal population has plummeted to almost zero, thanks to the pythons. And they are trying all sorts of fancy stuff with radiotelemetry and environmental DNA and all sorts of expensive ways of doing things, and sending out the snake hunters who drive the levees and roads at night and during the time when snakes are on the move. But they don't go down into the bushes and find the shedded skins and the scats and the tracks the way the Irlas do. So this was my thing. Get the Irlas back over there and teach the local snake hunters how to do it well. They wouldn't learn.
When was this?
Sorry?
When was this?
This was in 2017. Wow. So 2 Irlas, the same 2 guys who got the Padma Shri awards, by the way, Masi and Vadivel, went over to Florida, and we tried to teach the local snake hunters there how to do it right. The local snake hunters weren't too impressed. They said, well, you know, it's much easier to drive around with a 6-pack here, and, you know, and the AC on the car, and, you know. And, oh, there's a snake, quick, yeah, let's go. And then they catch it and put it in the car. The Irlas get right down into the bushes and they found, you know, where the pythons laid their eggs. They found shedded skins. They found where the snakes are really hiding and going. And I still think it's the answer, because they're not making any dent in the population there. They've caught 17,000 pythons in Florida so far. It's not even a dent. There's still tens of thousands more to find. So the next thing is to send 100 Irlas over there.
That's right.
Anyway, wishful thinking.
So a little earlier, James gave us a sense of the global snakebite burden.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about the toll of snakebite in India, you know, by the numbers?
Well, it's staggering enough that when you look at all the other animals in the world which cause human deaths or human mutilations, you can put them all together, and it doesn't come anywhere near a fraction of the number of people who are killed by snakes in India today. And this is the big problem. The data was not available to impress upon the government, to impress upon funders, on donors, that the snakebite situation is totally out of control. So something called the Million Death Study was undertaken by the Global Health Center of the University of Toronto in Canada, and the Registrar General in India. And luckily, I was put on the team and co-authored the report, which showed that as many as 58,000 people, men, women, and children, are killed by snakes every year in India. 58,000. Whereas the official government of India statistics were 1,500, because they were just getting their data from hospitals. Most people don't go to a hospital when they're bitten by a snake. They don't even have time to get there. They die out of hospital. So this is the crux of the problem, that data was not available to impress upon them how dire the situation really was. And this photograph is just an indication of how it is there. Snakes, we try to, when we're teaching people, snakes are not vengeful, they're not out to get you, but if you step on a snake, for example, you know, it wants to defend itself. And yeah.
Well, those numbers that you're sharing as well, those are just the deaths, right?
Yeah.
So there are so many more people who are injured along the way.
That's very true, and that's not part of the statistic, but it's very true. Out of, let's say 58,000 people are recorded, the deaths are recorded, but there are hundreds of thousands of people we call snakebite survivors who are either injured, permanently injured, or a limb amputated, or traumatized to such a degree that they lose their ability to create a livelihood for their families, or they've had to sell their cattle or their house or their land in order to pay for the medical bills. So yeah, it's a pretty dire situation.
You mentioned earlier that there are millions of doses of antivenom that are being created.
Yeah.
Is that not enough?
Yeah, this is a very important point. There are various funding agencies around the world who are putting good money into some very good possible solutions, making a better antivenom, which is very important. But when you're in India and you're in the village in India, you realize what the situation really is. If people even knew about the fact that antivenom was the only cure, that would be a great plus point, but people don't know about it. They know that the local healer the guy with the herbal remedy, or what we call mantra, chanting religious slogans and stuff like that, are the cures for snake bite. And these guys, it works quite a bit because most snake bites aren't fatal. So yeah, the guy he could be using Coca-Cola as the cure, and he'd still, people would still go to him because it's only costing 50 rupees for a bottle of Coke. But when a snake bites and you really get envenomated, you have to have antivenom. So it is totally curable, and if people just knew how to do it.
Knew how to do it, but then also need to get to the location, right? I mean, the antivenom, it seems like it can be hours to get to a hospital.
That's another point. The doctors there very rightly call the first hour after a snake bite the golden hour. And that's the time when a person has to get to the hospital. And again, in rural areas, we do have something called the 108 ambulance. It's a free ambulance service in India, which is fabulous, but it doesn't cover the entire country. There are plenty of rural areas where there is no 108 ambulance service. So we've seen people getting to hospital on the back of motorbikes, and it's quite sad and it's quite tragic, because if you're envenomated, you can't even hold on. So you've got to have 3 people on the bike, one guy to hold the other person on. But this may be the only transport is a motorbike. So I'm not going into even more detail on the problems, but there are severe problems.
There's also a financial burden that families
Absolutely.
face. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in terms of getting to those rural hospitals or rural health care facilities, what sort of care is available at those places? Are they equipped? Are the workers trained? Do people know how to handle it at least?
Yeah, we call them primary health centers, and these are the closest accessible medical facilities to village people in India. And there are very rarely a life support system there, for example, breathing apparatus. In the case of some snake bites, a person is not able to breathe, so he needs help with a breathing apparatus to keep him going. And very often the doctor will not be on call. A snake bite doesn't happen at the right time, It's usually at 2 a.m. or some weird time like that. And there's nobody around to treat the patient. So yeah, one problem after the other.
Yeah.
Or if the doctor may not even be trained in treating snake bite.
And what's it like to be bitten by a snake?
Yeah, I can tell you.
How many times have you been bitten?
Okay, I mean, people are always saying, so how many times have you been bitten by snakes? It's actually, to confess that is to confess stupidity, clumsiness, and that's me. I've been bitten several times, and it was always a case of definitely my own fault and definitely clumsiness and stupidity. And it's very painful. It's like, I guess you could say, a hot iron or a hot needle being pushed into your flesh. It really hurts. And then it swells up, and then it can lead to tissue loss, and, well, my trigger finger doesn't work anymore. That's why they didn't send me to Vietnam. That's my joke anyway. But yeah, and for a lot of people, it's even much worse because it can lead to necrosis, which is gangrene. And you see my hand all swollen up there. It's extremely bad experience, and yeah, you don't want it to happen.
Which are the most venomous snakes in India that you're really concerned about?
Well, we have 350 species of snakes in India. I wrote the definitive, people call it definitive field guide to Indian snakes, called Snakes of India. And when I wrote it, I think we had 260 species, and now we've got 350, so we've got to write another book. And we call it a field guide, and the damn thing weighs 1.5 kilograms. You need a field assistant to carry your field guide. So the next book is going to be 3 kilograms. But anyway, no. There are 4 snakes in India we call the big 4, and that is the cobra, the crate, the Russell's viper, and the saw-scale viper. Out of the 350 species of snakes, there are actually a dozen species which have caused human deaths, but these 4 cause the vast majority of the very serious bites, including deaths. So the antivenom which is made in India is made for these 4.
And what happens when one of these big 4 bites someone?
Well, a Russell's viper doesn't really want to bite you. He wants to get away, okay, when your foot comes near him. he's very interested. He's frightened. We're giants. And his huge giant foot comes down. And if he can, he gets away. If he can't, however, he's going to react by, well, you'll see in a second, biting. And this is all very slow motion, of course. This is 1,000 frames per second. When they bite fast and very hard. But very often they miss. And I'll tell you a little story about that afterwards. But when they do bite, it can get serious. And the fangs are very long, and the injection of venom is very deep. Now this is very interesting, because when you see a cobra striking, I mean, a cobra is a very dangerous looking snake with its hood spread. He didn't even open his mouth. He just struck and hit the foot. He doesn't want to waste his venom, okay? The venom has evolved to catch its prey, not to defend himself. So if he has to defend himself, he would just try to scare the foot away, so to speak, by just striking at it. And it usually works. When a snake strikes at you, you usually leave it alone.
Whose poor foot is this? What is happening here?
We had to pay that volunteer a lot of money. No. You've got to know that it's an artificial foot. No, but we had people looking at me aghast saying, how much did you pay him? In the case of a Russell's viper bite, it can cause tremendous blood problems, coagulation problems. In the case of a crate bite, typically it starts paralyzing the nervous system, including the nerves which which control your breathing. And this is the biggest problem with crate bite. It's a very, very toxic venom. And very often, even an injection of antivenom won't reverse it after a certain period of time. Yeah. Cobra bites cause necrosis. Necrosis is local gangrene, and this again is very, very hard to control. Russell's viper bite can cause gangrene to the extent that an amputation might take place. So this is something that people face. Unless they get treatment very rapidly, within the first couple of hours, they could have a tremendous problem with it. And
you've, met several people who have suffered from snake bite over the years. How have they inspired your work?
Yeah, it's always a tragic situation. For example, one of the people who influenced me a lot, one of the Irlas, Chokalingam, his daughter, was on her wedding day. Her husband was one of the Irla tribals who caught snakes, and caught a crate and put it into one of those mud pots with a cloth cover on it. And that night, while they were sleeping, the crate emerged from the pot and bit her. And they have, this is on her wedding day, okay? And they have their own traditional herbs and stuff to use, and they tried to treat her with this herbal remedy. And by the time they took her to the hospital later in the morning, she died. And similarly, I took a young lad to the hospital, one of the many I took to hospital, and he was bitten by a cobra. We had seen the cobra, we knew what he was bitten by, but I got to the hospital, and it was a hospital where they didn't know me and when we got there, the guy pulls out this form, and he says, okay, what is your name? Okay, and your father's name? Okay, and your mother's name? And I was saying, you've got to get antivenom, you've got to get it started, you've got to get a needle into him fast so that we can start the antivenom. So I sort of blew up and made it happen. But this is the kind of delay that could happen and could cause a fatality.
So what is the thing that could be done right now that is the simplest piece of the solution? What's the lowest hanging fruit here?
I'll tell you, the real thing that we have to do is prevent snake bite from happening in the first place. Because yes, the curative aspects of snake bite are there. They're getting much better. The antivenom is improving, and the doctors are getting trained. We know what to do once the person gets to a hospital. But wouldn't it be much better if we can stop those snake bites from happening full stop, right from the beginning? And that is, showing kids which are the non-venomous snakes, for example, which are the venomous, which are the non-venomous. Those big four, I keep telling people, well, someone asked me the other day, but you only get a quick view of a snake. How do you know whether it's a poisonous one or a venomous one or not? But I say, well, you can tell. Can you tell a crow from a pigeon and a sparrow and a myna? And everyone says, of course we can. So why not be able to recognize a Russell's viper, a saw-scale viper, a crate, and a cobra? So they say, yeah, well, we can make a try at it anyway. So getting people to understand not only what snakes look like, but what their behavioral patterns are. You know, when they come out, when they're most active, how to avoid them. Snakes move around a lot at night. So doesn't it make sense to use a light at night? Okay, I wanted to get to a story about that. I heard my dog barking one night, and everyone who was in the house was asleep. This was at the Madras Crocodile Bank, and you know, I go out into my backyard almost every night, well, to take a leak or whatever I have to do. And I just walk out there. It's my backyard after all, right? So I walked out without a flashlight to shut the bloody dog up. And the third step I took, I stepped on something, well, it was slightly soft, rope-like, yielding, and it was a bit rough. I was in bare feet, of course. I had my sarong and no light. And then, you know what a pressure cooker sounds like when it's at full volume. And you know how the old cartoons, you can jump and sort of tread air for... Yeah, I was treading air and got back on the porch and got my light, and yes, a nice big Russell's viper was there. Why I didn't get bitten, I have no idea. Maybe whenever I see that, the image we saw earlier of the Russell's viper striking and then sort of stupidly, clumsily missing, he could have done that and missed. But man, what a lesson, what an incredible lesson for me. I never go out at night without a light and looking very carefully. And I try to tell people that. And that's another point. Me, the snake guy, telling people what to do is not enough. We've got to we are teaching people, training people who are trainers, and preferably people who have experienced a snake bite themselves or know somebody in their village who has experienced a snake bite. And these are the people which the local people will listen to. So they're incredibly good at training people, not us. And you know, snake lovers and all this kind of stuff.
What about the government of India? Are they involved? Is there more that they need to do?
Well, I'm very happy to say that the government of India is responding right now. This is just the right time for it to happen. It has been quite a bit of work on our part to make it happen. And I think the data that has come out, the realization that snakebite is a much bigger problem than anyone ever realized in government. For example, in our state of Tamil Nadu, where the IRLA cooperative exists, we've been trying to improve the IRLA cooperative so that a better quality of venom is produced. I mean, after all, it's the raw material for the production of antivenom by immunizing horses. You're probably familiar with the fact that most antivenom is made by immunizing horses with gradually increasing amounts of venom. But the IRLA cooperative has to reach a standard that the WHO has mandated of a higher quality of venom. So the Tamil Nadu government is now in the process of funding the creation of a large serpentarium so that the IRLA cooperative will make a much better quality venom. I think it's great, and things are very positive right now.
So what more does the movement in India, what more do you need?
Well, we're an NGO, we're tiny. The government, you know, is vast. And we're talking about educating people, man. You know how many rural people there are in India? Yeah, close to 900 million people. I mean, close to 1 billion people are rural dwellers. And these are all people who could be bitten by snakes. And we've got a health system which in some states works beautifully, but in some states, like in West Bengal, where this picture was taken, the public health system is in tatters. It's really under tremendous pressure. This was a photograph taken in the pre-pandemic days. And when I saw this and then realized what was happening then during the pandemic, you don't even want to try to imagine what happened after that. This is incredible.
Thank you very much for enlightening us, and welcome to the city of Milpitas. Milpitas is honored to have you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. We have a commendation from the mayor of Milpitas, and sorry she could not be here, so we are here to give it to you on behalf of them.
Please.
Thanks. Let me come down. Wow, how wonderful.
The city of Milpitas presents this commendation to Mr. Ram Whitaker on behalf of the Milpitas Community City Council and Mayor Carmen Montano. I, Anunaka, and our Planning Commissioner, Mr. Deepak Awasthi, recognize Mr. Ram Whitaker of the Global Snakebite Initiative as the speaker at the Falcon X event in Milpitas, California. Mr. Whitaker was selected as an Associate Laureate in the 2008 Rolex Awards for Enterprise for his efforts in creating a network of rainforest research stations throughout India. He founded the Agumbe Rainforest Research Station in Karnataka for the study of king cobras and their habitat. In 2018, he received the Padma Shri Award, the fourth highest civilian award in India for distinguished services in wildlife conservation. Congratulations on all your accomplishments, sir, and awards. So thank you, and we wish you the continued success. Presented on the 20th day of September 2023 on behalf of the city of Milpitas. Thank you so very much.
What an honor. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.